It began with a silence that should have been impossible. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the lights at Black Hollow Penitentiary, a maximum security facility buried in the deserts of Nevada, flickered once. Then again. And then went dark completely. For precisely 7 minutes, the entire facility vanished into a darkness so deep that not even the infrared security cameras could penetrate it. When the lights surged back to life, chaos should have erupted. Alarms. Shouts. Gunfire. The usual signs of an escape attempt. But this time, there was nothing. Only silence, eerie and absolute. Unit 9C, Block Delta. The deepest cell in the entire facility. Reinforced concrete walls. Triple lock magnetic doors. Monitored 24/7 by biometric scanners and heat sensors. No one had ever escaped from Block Delta. Until that night. The guard outside cell 943 stumbled backward as his flashlight beam cut across the inside. His breath caught in his throat. The cell door stood wide open, the locks burned out from the inside. And within the cell, nothing. The bed was neatly made. The meal tray untouched. On the floor, a pair of handcuffs lay open, resting atop a folded piece of paper. The words written in pen, so calm, so deliberate, sent chills down every spine that would later read them. I was never really here. He was gone. No guards had seen anything. No cameras had captured a single frame. No alarms had sounded. There was no sign of forced entry or tampering. The biometric scans showed no activity. But the prisoner who had vanished, Marcus Kane, was not just another inmate. He was the inmate. The one who made prison staff transfer their shifts. The one whose name wasn't spoken out loud. The one who, despite being locked down for 23 hours a day, managed to orchestrate crimes more sophisticated than anything seen on the outside. He didn't just escape confinement. He controlled it. Bent it to his will. He had been labeled many things: murderer, genius, sociopath, ghost. But inside the federal system, one title stuck more than any other: America's most dangerous prisoner. And now, he was gone. A full lockdown was ordered. Helicopters swept the desert. Sniffer dogs, drones, and heat-seeking scanners combed every inch of the facility's perimeter. Nothing. The escape was called impossible. But that word had lost its meaning when applied to Marcus Kane. This was not his first disappearance. It was his fourth. Each time more sophisticated. Each time more violent. And each time, the message was the same: he was always 10 steps ahead. As the sun rose over Black Hollow that morning, the federal government moved fast. Files were sealed. Press was blocked. All communications from the prison were shut down. The public was told nothing. Just another blackout. Just a system error. Nothing to worry about. But inside the halls of power, in the FBI, the DOJ, and the Office of Homeland Security, something far more terrifying was taking shape. Marcus Kane wasn't just gone. He had left behind a message, encoded in the prison's internal network. A string of numbers. A location. A date. 3 days from now. And this time, authorities believed he wasn't just escaping. He was preparing something far worse. But before we can understand what Marcus Kane planned next, we need to go back. To the beginning. To the story no one was allowed to tell. To the boy who became a ghost. The student who became a killer. The inmate who became a legend. This is the untold story of how Marcus Kane became America's most dangerous prisoner. Before the world knew Marcus Kane as a monster, before his name was whispered in prison yards like a curse, he was just a boy. A boy with ice in his veins, silence in his soul, and a stare that made grown men shift uncomfortably. Marcus was born on a cold November night in 1984, in a dilapidated house outside of Buffalo, New York. His mother, Caroline Kane, was just 17. His father, Daniel Kane, never stayed long enough to sign a birth certificate. From the start, Marcus was raised in shadows. Not just of poverty, but of violence. By the time he was 5, he had witnessed 2 home invasions, 1 attempted murder, and the overdose death of his uncle in the same living room where he played with his action figures. Social services visited the Kane household 6 times in Marcus's early childhood. Each time, they left with notes about limited engagement, flat affect, and precocious intelligence. What they never understood was that Marcus wasn't broken, he was observing. In first grade, he solved complex math problems his teachers couldn't explain. In third, he hacked into his school's grading system using a library computer. In fifth, he stopped speaking altogether. By middle school, Marcus Kane had stopped being a child in any recognizable sense. He watched people the way an entomologist studies insects, curiously, quietly, without emotion. Teachers mistook him for shy. Students, for weird. But beneath that blank expression was a storm no one saw coming. His first act of true violence was at age 12. A local teenager named Chase Darnell had been bullying kids around the neighborhood, stealing bikes, punching younger boys in the hallways, even pulling a knife on a freshman after school. Everyone was afraid of Chase. Everyone except Marcus. One day, Marcus followed Chase home. What happened next was never officially proven, but that night, Chase was found unconscious in his backyard. His jaw was broken in 3 places. His fingers were fractured. There were burn marks on his arm from an electric fence that hadn't been installed. Marcus was never charged. No one saw anything. No one ever spoke of it again. But from that day forward, the bullying stopped. And so did Marcus's restraint. He started experimenting, testing boundaries, seeing how far he could push before anyone pushed back. He killed animals, yes. But he also manipulated people. He lied without blinking. Made students cry just by saying the right thing at the right time. He once convinced an entire class that their substitute teacher had been arrested for child abuse. A man was fired before the truth was uncovered. Marcus never admitted a thing. By 15, Marcus had a 148 IQ and a sealed juvenile record with 3 violent offenses. By 16, he had disappeared from the system completely. Dropped out. Off-grid. Gone. That was when the rumors began. In 2001, a series of home invasions began across New York State. Suburban homes, empty at night, yet stripped surgically of valuables. No alarms triggered. No cameras caught footage. Whoever was behind it was in and out in less than 10 minutes. The FBI dubbed the suspect the Whisper. It took 2 years before the Whisper was caught. And when authorities finally made the arrest, they were stunned to find a quiet 19-year-old with no bank account, no credit history, and no known associates. Marcus Kane. But that was just the beginning. The arrest didn't end the crimes. Instead, they escalated. Within days of his detention, 2 more homes were hit, both identical to his MO. Investigators scratched their heads. Copycat? Inside job? Then came the anonymous call. Distorted voice. A set of GPS coordinates. A challenge: prove you've got the right man. They found a cache buried under a storage unit registered to a fake name, files, blueprints, target lists. But also journals. Dozens of them. Meticulous records detailing not only the break-ins Marcus had committed, but those he had orchestrated remotely, through manipulated teens who thought they were doing favors for a friend. That was Marcus Kane's true gift. Not violence. Not stealth. Control. The charges against him couldn't be ignored. 27 burglaries, 5 cases of extortion, and an attempted murder that he would neither confirm nor deny. But it was what came after his conviction that truly began the legend. At his trial, Marcus refused a public defender. He represented himself, calmly, confidently, making the prosecution sweat with every word. When he spoke to the jury, it wasn't an apology, it was in warning. "You think cages can hold me," he said. "But cages only hold the body. Not the mind. And I never lived in mine." He was sentenced to 30 years in a maximum security facility, Redwood Correctional. He smiled as the verdict was read. And as the guards led him away, he whispered to the judge, "See you again." Redwood Correctional was designed to hold killers, not outthinkers. Constructed in 1986, the facility sat deep in Oregon's forest belt, surrounded by electric fencing, watchtowers, and reinforced concrete. Its population was the worst of the worst, men who had burned cities, dismembered families, and betrayed empires. In that hierarchy of monsters, Marcus Kane was a ghost. Unassuming. Quiet. Barely 21. His cell was solitary, no roommate. Just a bed bolted to the wall, a stainless steel toilet, and 4 inches of bulletproof plexiglass between him and the corridor. Guards assumed he was just another white-collar criminal caught playing puppet master. They were wrong. Marcus spent the first 27 days in silence. No requests. No movement. Barely any food. He stared at the camera in his cell for hours at a time, not blinking. Not threatening. Just watching. Then, on day 28, the murders began. It started with an inmate named Vernon Cross. Former biker. Convicted of 3 homicides and known in the prison yard as the Hammer for how he handled debt collection behind bars. He was found dead in the library. No blood. No weapon. Just slumped over a chessboard with a single piece missing, the bishop. His autopsy revealed something chilling, a crushed windpipe and a snapped hyoid bone. Someone had strangled Vernon so precisely that it looked like an accident. But there were no signs of a struggle. No bruises. No defensive wounds. Security footage showed Vernon walking into the library alone. No one else entered or left for 53 minutes. Word spread fast. Redwood wasn't unfamiliar with death. But this was different. Clean. Surgical. Intentional. Inmates began whispering. It's the new kid. No way. He hasn't left his cell. Exactly. 3 days later, another death. Javier Bones Ramirez, former cartel enforcer. Found hanging in the kitchen freezer with a mop handle lodged through his ribs. Again, no security footage. Again, no signs of forced entry. By the end of the month, 6 inmates were dead. Each death unique. Each execution style different. Each victim previously heard bad-mouthing or challenging Marcus in the yard. And Marcus? He was in his cell every single time. He never spoke about it. Never wrote about it. But once, during a random search, a guard found a single piece of paper tucked beneath his mattress. On it was a list of names, 6 of them already dead. There were 4 more. Warden Bill Caro was a man who had seen riots, fires, even an assassination attempt. He'd never seen fear infect his prison like this. Men who once ran criminal syndicates were requesting transfers. Lifers were begging for protective custody. And the cameras, sensors, and guards, none of it seemed to matter. Kane was killing without moving. The FBI was called in. Behavioral analysts, cryptographers, forensic specialists. The first assumption was a conspiracy, maybe guards were helping. Maybe inmates were playing a long con. But as they dug deeper, the truth was more unsettling. Marcus Kane had created a network inside the prison walls. Not with cell phones. Not with bribes. With language. He had studied every inmate, what made them tick, what they feared, what they wanted. He listened. And when he spoke, it was always subtle. A word here. A look there. A piece of information dropped at the right moment. He didn't order hits. He made people believe that doing what he wanted was their idea. In one case, a man strangled his own cousin with a shoelace during a game of dominoes, just days after Marcus had handed him a book on Roman history, specifically highlighting Caesar's betrayal. The cousin's name? Brutus. Kane's weapon was suggestion. By the time investigators realized it, half the staff at Redwood had already interacted with him. And more than a few had started acting strangely. Shifts changed without notice, logs disappeared, and a corrections officer was found passed out drunk on the floor of cell block C. In the warden's own words, "We didn't have a prisoner. We had a virus." The tipping point came when Kane himself requested a meeting with the prison's psychologist. Dr. Elaine Voss, a seasoned profiler with 14 years of experience, expected the usual cat-and-mouse routine. What she got was a masterclass in manipulation. Kane spoke for exactly 37 minutes. He didn't confess. He didn't threaten. He simply talked, about choice, about fate, about how everyone was just a reflection of what they feared the most. By the end of the session, Dr. Voss walked out of the room shaking. She turned in her resignation the next day and was never seen again. Her notes from that session were sealed. But one line was later leaked to a journalist: "Kane doesn't destroy people. He turns them into versions of themselves they don't recognize." The last murder at Redwood was the most shocking. Warden Bill Caro. Found in his office, an antique straight razor in his hand, wrists slashed. His blood had been used to write a sentence on the wall. He was right. Kane was moved that very night. Under federal emergency order, he was transferred to Black Hollow Penitentiary, unmarked vans, no media coverage, an escort of 12 U.S. Marshals, and air support. The man they once thought was just a manipulator was now classified as a national security threat. At 22 years old, Marcus Kane became the youngest prisoner ever placed under Code Zero, a status reserved for threats that could destabilize public trust or national operations. His cell in Black Hollow was custom designed. No windows. Soundproof. 2 meals a day through a steel chute. 24/7 surveillance by AI-driven monitoring systems. They believed they had stopped him. But Kane wasn't done. He hadn't even begun. Black Hollow Penitentiary was not built for redemption. It was built for containment. Its foundations were poured deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, far from civilization, designed to hold the unholdable. Inmates inside were not just dangerous, they were anomalies, men who could not be explained by normal psychological profiles. And among them, Marcus Kane became a ghost story. He arrived in silence. No shackles. No fight. He wore the standard orange jumpsuit and showed no expression. But even before the transport van had turned off its engine, Black Hollow's warden, Alice Galloway, had ordered her staff on high alert. Kane was isolated in cell 0, no light, no books, no interactions. Only one guard was authorized to speak to him, and only through an intercom built into a titanium door. But Marcus did not need light to see. He did not need books to learn. And he did not need visitors to influence. It began with the plumbing. 7 days into his confinement, the water pressure across cell block Omega dropped. Maintenance discovered that the internal piping had been rerouted, intentionally. Someone had accessed blueprints that were not in circulation. Someone had engineered a diversion system using the ancient tunnels beneath Black Hollow, long since abandoned and supposedly sealed off after the original construction. Marcus had never left his cell. Guards dismissed it as sabotage by another inmate. The engineers patched the system. Then the riot started. One in cell block E, another in Delta Wing. Prisoners burned mattresses. Screamed of voices at night. Claimed they were being shown messages through reflections in their steel cups. None of it made sense. Security footage from the day before each riot showed Marcus Kane, sitting. Staring. Silent. The riots were chaotic, but not random. Each one created a diversion that exposed a weak spot in the facility's structure. One riot occurred directly above an old communications hub. Another gave access to the elevator shaft once sealed during a flood. Kane was orchestrating the entire facility like a chessboard, and no one had seen him move a piece. Warden Galloway brought in independent contractors. Hackers. Coders. Black budget technicians. They ran a digital sweep of the prison's internal network. What they found chilled them. Someone was sending packets of data out of Black Hollow using the prison's own climate control systems. Embedded inside HVAC diagnostic logs were encoded messages, timed sequences of temperature and airflow patterns that, when decoded, revealed binary strings. Each string pointed to a location outside the prison. A warehouse in Detroit. A library in Kansas. A laundromat in El Paso. FBI raids on each site uncovered encrypted flash drives hidden behind fake electrical outlets and vending machines. The drives contained manifests, floor plans, and criminal dossiers. One even contained instructions for a robbery that had occurred 3 weeks earlier, a bank job in Salt Lake City executed with such precision that investigators had assumed military involvement. The plan had been written by Marcus Kane. From inside a sealed cell. Kane had turned Black Hollow into a war room. He didn't need a phone. He didn't need email. He had created a language no one could trace. A digital breath code, spoken through machinery. And he wasn't working alone. Hidden in the logs was one more anomaly, a recurring reference to a name, Asael. Authorities believed Asael was a former intelligence officer, long presumed dead after a covert operation in Eastern Europe. He was Kane's courier. His ghost. His outside hand. But no one had ever seen him. No fingerprints. No facial recognition matches. Kane had found a partner who was as invisible as he was. At this point, Kane's case was elevated beyond federal. The NSA got involved. Then the Department of Homeland Security. Rumors swirled in Washington that Kane might have been created, not born. That perhaps he was part of an experimental program, designed to test mind control or psychological warfare. Congress demanded answers. But Marcus? He just waited. In the middle of the growing national panic, he requested another psychological session. This time, they sent in someone different, Drive. Isabel Kane, former military interrogator turned profiler. Their conversation lasted exactly 11 minutes. Kane asked only one question: what would you do if the world decided you were guilty before you were ever tried? Dr. Kane asked him what he meant. Kane smiled and said, I am simply the result of other people's decisions. When she left the room, Kane reported to the warden, he's not insane. He's not delusional. He's planning something bigger than we can see. Days later, the Black Hollow blackout occurred. An EMP of unknown origin knocked out the facility's electronics. Backup systems failed. Surveillance was lost for 3 hours and 41 minutes. When systems returned, Marcus was still in his cell. But every other high-risk prisoner in cell block Omega had vanished. 10 men. Gone. No bodies. No trails. No alarms triggered. Inside Kane's cell, investigators found a single object, a chessboard. The game was in progress. White Queen had just taken the Black King. Kane didn't speak for a week. Then one morning, when the guard came to deliver his food, Kane looked directly at the camera and said, what makes you think the prison is meant to hold me? A week later, the first of the escaped prisoners was found, dead, in a theater in Chicago. Strangled. A copy of The Art of War left next to the body, page 53 underlined, when you surround an army, leave an outlet. The next escapee was found in New Orleans, drowned in a rooftop pool, with coordinates carved into his arm. The coordinates pointed to Black Hollow. Kane was eliminating them. One by one. The press called him a vigilante. Others called him a terrorist. But law enforcement understood something darker: Kane wasn't cleaning up loose ends. He was building a myth. Every corpse. Every coded message. Every chessboard piece. It was a signature, a psychological operation on a national scale. He had turned his incarceration into a performance. A theater of control. And the country was watching. By now, Marcus Kane was no longer just an inmate. He was a symbol, a shadow in the shape of a man. Whispers about him leaked beyond the prison walls and into the public sphere. Journalists pieced together fragments. Leaked reports. Redacted files. Mysterious disappearances. The internet gave him names: the Warden Killer, Ghost of Black Hollow, the Man with No Exit. And then someone went too far. A well-known crime podcast aired a 2-part exposé claiming to have insider information about Kane's origins. The hosts implied that Kane had ties to classified CIA black sites. They claimed he had once escaped a submarine in international waters. One alleged Kane wasn't born in the United States, he was created in it. The podcast went viral. Within days, Kane had gone from conspiracy theory to headline. Protesters appeared outside the Department of Justice demanding transparency. Memes flooded social media platforms. Hashtags trended worldwide: hashtag Kane Truth, hashtag Who is Kane, hashtag Set Kane Free. What followed was unprecedented. Anonymous donors began contributing to a legal defense fund in his name, over $3.2 million in less than 2 weeks. An underground movement formed online, composed of digital activists, rogue hackers, and self-proclaimed truth seekers. Their mission: prove that Kane was a scapegoat in a much bigger government cover-up. The government responded the only way it knew how: quietly and forcefully. They erased him. Public records mentioning Kane were scrubbed. The podcast episode was pulled from every platform. A coordinated campaign of silence swept across the digital landscape. Those who persisted in digging into Kane's story found themselves banned, shadow banned, or in some cases, investigated. Meanwhile, inside Black Hollow, Marcus Kane remained silent. Until he wasn't. During a routine psychiatric check-in, Kane made an offhand remark: "They always clean up after the show." But the audience never forgets. Dr. Kane, now monitoring Kane full-time, wrote in her report, "He knows exactly what he's doing. He's not reactive, he's proactive. He's using us as the stage." The government knew this couldn't go on. Kane was no longer just a prisoner. He was a contagion of doubt. A walking paradox. Every second he remained alive in Black Hollow, his legend grew. A covert task force was assembled. Comprised of elite military strategists, psychological operations specialists, and disavowed agents. Their job was not to kill Marcus Kane. It was to erase him from history. Operation Null Point was born. The plan was elegant in its brutality. Step 1. Fake his death. A false narrative would be seeded into internal reports. Kane had suffered a cardiac arrest. There would be no funeral. No body. No media alert. Just a silent footnote in the Bureau of Prisons database. Step 2. Extract him. Under cover of a fake medical transport, Kane would be moved to a secondary black site in Greenland, an unlisted base known only as Station 9. There, he would be drugged, disoriented, and monitored until the end of his life. But Kane was ahead of them. Hours before the operation launched, Black Hollow experienced another anomaly. Not a blackout. Not a riot. A silence. All internal communication systems shut down, not from outside interference, but from within. A self-terminating script executed across the network, triggered by a thermal fluctuation in the main server room. The pattern of that fluctuation? A Morse code message: "This is your last move." Kane had written the end of their play. When the task force arrived to extract him, they found the cell empty. Cell 0, sealed, locked, and monitored, was open. Inside, Kane's jumpsuit was folded on the bed. A single playing card rested on top, the Joker. There were no signs of forced exit. No tunnel. No breach. Kane was gone. Again. But it was more than just another escape. It was a message: you cannot erase an idea. The aftermath was chaos. The prison was put on lockdown. Staff interrogated. Systems audited. The lead technician monitoring Kane's cell had vanished the same night, later discovered to have purchased a private flight to Reykjavik under a false identity. In Washington, panic spread. Someone had orchestrated an escape from the most secure facility in North America, without force. Without bloodshed. Without a trace. Kane had proven something terrifying: he didn't need to run. He made the world come to him. News of the escape never reached the public. The official line? Marcus Kane died of cardiac arrest in federal custody. His body was cremated. Case closed. But behind closed doors, the truth spread like wildfire. Kane had become an open secret in the highest levels of government, a name never spoken aloud, a symbol of what happens when systems create something they cannot control. One senator, in an off-the-record conversation, described Kane as a glitch in the matrix. A former CIA analyst went further: he's not just a man. He's the question we're too afraid to ask. And just like that, Marcus Kane disappeared again. Only this time, he left no survivors. No press. No story. Only silence. But silence is the greatest amplifier of myth. And Kane was no longer just dangerous. He was immortal. The year was 2017. 4 months after Marcus Kane's disappearance from Cell 0 at Black Hollow, an encrypted data packet was intercepted by intelligence analysts in Berlin. It was unsigned, untraceable, and heavily encoded. Inside was a single image, a black chessboard. On it, a Lone King piece. Its shadow? A Joker's silhouette. Attached was one line of text: immediately, red alerts triggered in Washington, London, Tel Aviv, and Tokyo. The encryption style matched no known adversary. No terrorist faction claimed it. No state-sponsored cyber army stepped forward. But one man came to mind. Kane. Though officially declared dead, the agencies most familiar with his case never believed it. They had witnessed too much. Every official file marked deceased still bore an internal classification tag, possibly active threat. What followed was the most extensive non-combat manhunt in modern history. It had no public face. No reward. No press conference. Just a quiet, relentless pursuit by the world's most secretive agencies, each of them chasing the ghost of a man who was always one step ahead. He had become a myth. But myths do not leave footprints. Kane did. It began with a power failure at the US Embassy in Prague. A 2-minute outage triggered a cascade of security failures. Hard drives wiped. Backup servers fried. All CCTV files for a 72-hour window were corrupted, each overwritten with a grainy video loop of a single blinking eye. In the embassy's server room, someone had left behind a card. The King of Spades. Taped to the server rack with the words, "Your move." 3 months later, an anonymous delivery arrived at the Chilean Defense Ministry. It was a locked briefcase, addressed to a colonel who had never met Kane, yet had once co-authored a classified psychological warfare study that indirectly referenced his file. Inside the case was a book, The Art of War, but with entire sections replaced by Kane's handwritten annotations. In the margins, Kane had left notes: "Power is never taken, it is made obsolete. If they seek to contain you, become vapor. Not escape. Evolution." The handwriting was matched. It was authentic. Kane was alive. On a quiet summer night in Lisbon, every television and radio station in the country went black for 4.7 seconds. Then, a static-filled signal interrupted. No voice. No image. Just a string of binary. It translated to GPS coordinates in central Alaska. At that exact spot, a buried container holding nothing but a burned piece of a black hollow jumpsuit and a chessboard, missing only the king. Kane was playing a global game. Every move was calculated. Every message deliberate. He was not hiding. He was teaching. And the lesson was simple: no system is unbreakable. Not when the system itself has cracks. By 2019, Kane's fingerprints, both literal and psychological, had surfaced in more than a dozen major intelligence disruptions. A fire in a Moscow archive wiped decades of surveillance footage. An encrypted signal piggybacked on a Chinese military satellite triggered false launch codes. An MI6 operative vanished in broad daylight, leaving behind a letter that simply read, "Kane lives." And yet, there was still no image. No voice recording. No witness testimony. Kane's very presence had become informational. Ideas slipped like viruses into the bloodstream of world powers. Each agency now had its own Kane task force. And yet not one could predict his next move. Until Geneva. In early 2020, as the World Security Conference convened under the highest levels of protection, a breach occurred. Not a bombing. Not an attack. An addition. On every delegate's chair, printed on government-grade paper, sat a personal file. Inside, a detailed breakdown of their most classified psychological profile, fears, vulnerabilities, and hidden compromises. At the bottom of each page was the same line: "The walls you build will never protect what you hide." Each document was signed, MC. The chaos was instant. Trust shattered. Delegates turned on each other. Whispers of leaks, spies, and infiltrations broke out across diplomatic lines. But Kane had done something more powerful than destruction. He had introduced fear. Not of violence. Not of weapons. Of exposure. He was weaponizing knowledge, turning transparency into terror. Dr. Evelyn Kane, the prison psychologist who had last treated Kane, had been following the pattern obsessively. Though no longer on official payroll, she was recruited by a private think tank studying decentralized intelligence disruptions. But she noticed no one else had. Kane wasn't just moving randomly. He was creating a path, shaped like a spiral. Each event, each incident, spiraled outward geographically and temporally, forming what she called the convergence pattern. And at the center? Not Washington. Not Moscow. It was a small, remote town in northern Greenland. Station 9. The place where Operation Null Point was supposed to take him. Dr. Kane made a chilling observation: he is not just taunting us. He's telling a story. And we're part of it. Just as governments began preparing countermeasures, Kane sent one last signal. A secure communication breached a Pentagon simulation chamber during a live wargame scenario. A voice, not Kane's, but synthetically generated, spoke through the simulation's AI system. Your security is your prison. Escape not from your walls, but from your belief in them. This is not a threat. This is a future. Adapt or vanish. And silence. The AI simulation code was found overwritten with Kane's original black hollow psychiatric file. Every digital system used in the chamber was wiped. And Kane vanished again. Only this time, he left no trail. No clue. Only the idea that somewhere, someone who once lived inside the walls you built, was now rewriting the rules. In the years that followed the Geneva incident, Kane's name slipped from databases and headlines, but it never left the minds of those who had studied him. To governments, he was a blueprint for failure. To theorists, he was proof of system vulnerability. To radicals, he was a prophet. And to the public, he was a myth. But myths, when powerful enough, have a peculiar afterlife. They do not fade. They evolve. began on obscure message boards, locked forums, and dark web think tanks. Groups began referring to Kane's philosophies, calling themselves the Zero Protocol, a reference to his cell number, Cell Zero, and the idea that total freedom could only be achieved when one reduced themselves to zero. No identity, no record, no attachment. These weren't criminals, not in the traditional sense. They were ex-hackers, whistleblowers, rogue academics, and some say even former intelligence agents, people who had read the leaked Kane transcripts and saw not a madman, but a model. They began executing small but precise attacks. Not for money. Not for ideology. To test system flaws. To expose complacency. They'd send internal security documents back to their owners, unmodified, except with Kane's symbol stamped in the corner, a king without a crown. Governments tried to shut them down, but they were fighting smoke. No central leadership. No digital footprint. Only one rule: act with precision, never repetition. Disappear before you're seen. The ghost of Kane had become a virus in the global psyche. At West Point, Langley, and other elite institutions, Kane's escape became part of classified curriculum. Not officially. Not publicly. But behind closed doors, instructors asked questions like, what makes a prisoner more dangerous outside the cell than within it? How do you contain someone who no longer needs a body to exist? In those rooms, students debated Kane's psychology, strategy, and logic. They studied his written fragments, ran simulations on his methods, and most haunting of all, they failed to predict his moves every single time. It had become a case study in uncontainable intelligence. Not because of violence, but because of clarity. Kane understood systems not as constructs, but as stories. And stories, once understood, could be rewritten. Dr. Evelyn Kane, now older, reclusive, and no longer active in consulting, published one final academic paper before vanishing from public life. It was titled, The Inverted Cage, a Study of Intentional Incarceration and Tactical Rebirth. She proposed that Kane had not escaped despite the system. He had escaped because of it. She argued that Kane used imprisonment as transformation, not punishment. By isolating himself, by submitting to control, he mapped every control mechanism. Not to resist, but to evolve beyond them. She concluded, Marcus Kane was not escaping from us. He was escaping through us. The system was never his prison. It was his cocoon. Her work was immediately classified. In 2024, 3 people connected to Kane's past vanished. The first was an ex-warden from Black Hollow. Last seen withdrawing all his money and cash and boarding a freighter with no manifest. The second, a cybersecurity analyst who once decoded Kane's Lisbon signal. He was found in a remote Mongolian village under a new identity. He refused to speak when discovered. The third, a reporter who had written extensively about Kane's early prison stunts. Her apartment was found undisturbed, her research wiped, and one item remained, a chessboard missing the king. Some believe Kane contacted them. Others believe they joined him. A few believe they were silenced. The truth remains vapor. And yet, the world kept watching. A grainy photo from a Cairo alley shows a man with Kane's bone structure. A security camera in Vancouver recorded a passerby who walked with his distinctive gait. A subway surveillance tape in Seoul caught a face, a single frame, remarkably similar. None confirmed. All unsettling. He was now Schrödinger's fugitive. Alive and dead. Present and absent. A ghost built not of flesh, but of patterns, symbols, echoes. In early 2025, a whistleblower inside a defense contractor leaked a portion of what appeared to be an unfinished manifesto. It bore Kane's linguistic markers, formatting style, and even his favorite syntactical rhythm. The manifesto read, "In every locked room is a key. Sometimes it is not made of metal, but of memory. You locked yourselves away. I only showed you the door." It closed with a prediction: the next walls will not be made of concrete. They will be made of data. And they will fall harder than any stone ever could. The world took notice. But not everyone understood. And so, as Kane's trail grew colder, his impact grew louder. He had become the embodiment of every system's fear, not a threat to life, but a threat to control. He was the reminder that no system, no matter how fortified, is safe from the one who sees through its lies. And in that silence, one last whisper remained. Maybe Kane never wanted revenge. Maybe he never wanted to destroy the world. Maybe he simply wanted to teach it how to escape. There is a moment, somewhere between silence and revelation, where a story stops being about the man and starts being about us. Marcus Kane was never just a prisoner. He was never just a genius. He was never even just an escape artist. He was a question. A mirror. A challenge wrapped in flesh and myth, thrown at the feet of every institution that believed it was untouchable. Kane did not need to win in the traditional sense. He did not need power. He did not need fame. He only needed time. And he used every second of it with surgical precision. An empty prison cell. Security monitors looping static. A chessboard missing its king. A flicker of light across an anonymous face in a crowd. A news anchor hesitating before saying his name. A whisper of wind through razor wire. We often believe that prisons are made of steel, concrete, surveillance. Kane proved that the real prisons are patterns. The assumptions we never question. The systems we think are unbreakable. The identities we're assigned without choice. And once someone breaks those, there is no wall high enough. No code secure enough. No system smart enough to stop the man who no longer plays by the rules of the cage. You are not inside the system. The system is inside you. Unattributed, believed to be Kane. So, where is Marcus Kane? Some say dead. Some say hiding. Some say he never existed at all. But there is one truth no one can deny: the world after Kane is a world forever changed. Because the moment he walked out of that final prison, he left the door open for the rest of us to question what freedom really means.